We will be holding a hybrid meeting tonight, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted July 7, 2022. Members of this SPR subgroup, the subgroup for the RiverHouse project, are participating both here in person and virtually through electronic means. At this time, I want to orient people to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the SPRC webpage, the project webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For subgroup members who are joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I think everyone's is off. That's great. I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: for SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance, and for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. I'll say one more thing about public comment, two more things about public comment momentarily. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who were planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn on your video feed and raise the virtual hand in Teams. We will be monitoring the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak, and the hands that are raised as an indicator of who raised their hand first. If subgroup members are participating via phone without the video option, please announce your name and group you are representing now. I will verbally check in to see if you wish to be recognized, as you do not have the video feed option. Do we have anyone participating by telephone? I don't see any. I see a few phone numbers. The people who are attending via phone, are any of you members of the SPRC subgroup? You'll have to dial *6 to unmute yourselves.
Hi, this is Doris Ray joining by phone.
Good evening, Dorothy. Any others? Oh, sorry, Doris. I misheard. Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Jane.
Let me know. Let you know that I may be somewhat in and out, or at least I'm going to try whatever I can do. The Housing Commission meets tonight, but the agenda is shorter than I think yours is.
Thank you, Doris. Anyone else among the phone participants who are part of the SPRC subgroup? A reminder that you will have to dial *6 to unmute. Thank you for that. Matt, I guess one of you or one of your colleagues will look into that to the extent that you're able to. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, and for those phoning in, there may be, it looks like there was a new link that was just circulated. It was circulated via all of the channels that I mentioned earlier, right?
Correct. So it's also on the project webpage for anybody who has the link to that URL. We can put that in the chat also.
Thanks. I'm guessing that anyone who's in the chat doesn't need the new link, but yeah. Right, yes, exactly. For our members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you'll be called upon to speak at the end of the meeting and will be allotted 2 to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for virtual attendees, or provide staff with your name if in person, and you will be added to the speakers list. I have seen the list. It may be circulating again, but please note that there are 2 circulating lists. One of them is for registering attendees, and the other one is for wishing to speak. So when we get to it, if you did not sign up to speak and you hear your name called, you may have signed up on the wrong list, and just say no thank you when you are called upon. Lastly, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. I'm going to go around the table and have us introduce ourselves, but also I am going to ask, similar to the last meeting, that when it comes time for questions and feedback, that at least the first couple of times, just please say who you are and what your affiliation is again. And the same request to people who are speaking online, even though we will likely be able to see your name beneath your face. I'm going to go around the table, and then we are going to go to the applicant. I'm going to go to staff first in case there's any sort of organizational or logistical things, and then go over to the applicant for presentation. So.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Adam Watson with Arlington County Planning Division. Apologies for the change in the Teams link. If you get a message from somebody who's asking to join and you have access to that new Teams link, please share it with them. Thank you.
Cattery Garcia, Arlington Ridge Civic Association.
Nick Giacobbe, Aurora Highlands Civic Association.
Jeff Williams, Crystal Pentagon Cities Council.
Hi, Pam Van Hine, Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and you have some SPRC members in the audience.
Thank you, Pam. I meant to note that. It looks like we have one more chair. If anyone in the audience who's at the table wants to come up, please feel welcome to do so. And I think we can probably
We can get more.
fit one or more as well. But I do really hope that we can have everyone who is at the table metaphorically be, okay, great, be at the table physically as well. Maybe one. That's fine. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you're up next, by the way.
Stanley Peterson, Planning Commission.
Richard Rebb, representing the representative.
Gray Favre, applicant team.
Carolyn Haynes, Forestry and Natural Resource Commission.
Kedrick Whitmore, I'm a land use and zoning attorney with Venable.
Jessica D., Board President, Pentagon Ridge Condo Association.
Sohail Hussain, Transportation Commission.
Jim Lantelme, Planning Commission.
Gary Shinners, Park and Rec Commission.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Rosamunda Osgo for the RiverHouse.
Joe Trevette for Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission.
I'm sorry, did you say Rosamund or Rosalind? Rosamunda, thank you.
There's two more chairs.
I think that's everyone. I'm going to go to Mr. Watson. You nodded, you shook your head, but I'm going to give you the opportunity if there are any logistical. Okay, so to the applicant then.
I've got it here. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gray Favre. I'm a part of the.
Gray, I'm gonna interrupt you real quickly. My apologies. I'm gonna take back to the applicant because I just realized that I forgot to see if we have anyone with us online. My apologies to colleagues. Do we have anyone online? Again, my apologies.
Hi, yes. Good evening. This is Tarcy Dunlap from the Crystal City Civic Association.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Doris Ray on the phone, Disability Advisory
Yep.
Commission.
My apologies all around again. Thank you for your indulgence.
No worries. Good evening, everyone. Gray Fawver. I'm part of the development team at JBG Smith. I'm joined here tonight by my colleagues, Matt Ginnivan, Craig Seacott, and Emma Gonzalez, as well as several members of our design team who you will hear from shortly. Tonight, we're here to present our updated proposal for the RiverHouse neighborhood, which is really a culmination of several years of work, which many of you have been a part of. But also want to remind folks that we're far from the finish line and there's still a lot of work to go. And so with that, and to present our updated proposal, I'll hand it off to Allie Reed of Torty Gallison Partners.
All right, thanks, Gray. My name's Allie Reed. I'm an architect with Torty Gallison Partners. So just to reorient us, the RiverHouse site today, we have the Ashley, the Potomac, and the James high-rise residential buildings. To the north of the site, we have Army Navy Drive. That's going to be the right side of your screen. On the left side of your screen to the south, the lower height single-family neighborhoods. West Post is directly to the east at the bottom of your screen. We'd like to start today by taking a look back quickly at where we've been and what we've heard. Back in 2023, the plan consisted of rental townhome fabric at the southern end of the site, mid-rise buildings C1, C2, and C3 in the central part of the neighborhood, mid-rise buildings N1 and N2, and to the far north, buildings F2, which is mid-rise, and building F3, which was high-rise. Between N1, a public open space directly across the road from the larger, more retail-centric West Post Plaza. And of course, the green ribbon woven through the neighborhood at various scales. Based on this plan, we received some feedback. I won't read through all of these because I'll go through them on the next slide, but big picture, changing building footprints and moving building footprints as well. So the team then worked with staff and made all of these changes. The plan evolved throughout 2024. We chamfered building C3 in order to improve the desired view shed between Virginia Highlands Park and the 15th Street spur, shifted the green ribbon segment within Land Bay S, shifted that east, pulled all of the townhome footprints further away from the southern property line. We increased the distance between buildings N1 and N2 to 97 feet and removed all of the far north buildings. As part of this version, the rental townhomes were also changed to be for sale townhomes. And with that change, a condo building was also incorporated. That's building O on this plan. At this stage, we received some more feedback. The larger points of that: decreasing building footprints, increasing heights and density. And again, I won't go through all of these, but we'll touch on them on the next slide. This brings us to today. This is the currently proposed PDSP that the team is planning to submit. On the southern portion of the site, we have significantly opened up that view shed between Virginia Highlands Park and the 15th Street spur. The building O, that condo building, has been removed from the application. Building C3, that footprint has been reduced significantly, and the distance between building C2 and C3 has been increased as well. In adjusting that C3 footprint and removing the O building, the team was able to reevaluate the alignment of Kent Street. You can see between the C2 building and the townhome footprints in this plan. So this plan represents a slight realignment there, which allows us to preserve some of the existing RiverHouse amenities for RiverHouse residents in the interim condition. And we'll see that in a phasing plan later in the presentation. To the north, we also reduced the footprint of building N2, increasing the heights to 22 stories on the Joyce Street side and 12 stories on the Lynn Street side, allowing for a plaza or a public open space of some sort that roughly matches the width of West Post Plaza across the street. We also incorporated building N3, that's new to this proposal, 22-story residential tower. For building N1, we actually removed the entire southeast wing of that building, overall reducing the size of that building and reducing facade lengths on Joyce Street. Overall, this proposal represents roughly a 35% increase in potential density for the RiverHouse neighborhood. This is the massing of the prior proposal, so that 2024 version that we saw a few slides ago. You can see the townhome footprints on the left of the screen, creating that low-rise fabric on the southern end of the site. The mid-rise residential and mixed-use buildings filling out the rest of the neighborhood, as well as the green ribbon woven throughout. Sorry about that. In comparison, today's proposal actually includes greater space between buildings, so a larger building separation distance, generally smaller footprints, and increased density. With that, I'll hand it over to Belle with Bradley Site Design.
All right, thanks, Allie. I'm Belle St. John Day with Bradley Site Design, landscape architect for the project. And much like Allie was describing, the revision the design team has taken with the building massing, we've also been reviewing the green ribbon connections throughout the RiverHouse site to ensure we're creating a connected site throughout RiverHouse and into the larger community. So when we go to the next slide, this is the proposed full build out of the green ribbon on the site, with the remaining much the same as the last SPRC that everyone saw. The biggest revision coming to that primary green ribbon from the 15th Street spur connecting to Virginia Highlands Park. So the next slide, we zoom into that area, and what we heard an emphasis on was the line of sight from that prospect at the base of the 15th Street spur and between the Ashley and the Potomac facing Virginia Highlands Park. So we've highlighted that in yellow. And then you can see we've placed that primary green ribbon within that view shed. Understanding we still have 52 feet plus of elevation we have to navigate with this green ribbon. We want to be clear that this won't be a straight shot to 15th Street spur, that it'll have to be a meandering biophilic experience as laid out in the sector plan. Along with that, at the crossing of the primary green ribbon at Kent Street, with the realignment of Kent Street, we've been able to raise the elevation as we were most constrained, making that topographic change between the Kent Street connection and the 15th Street spur. And so with that raise in elevation, we're able to splay more of those ADA pathways and allow more canopy and vegetation area within that space. And then that move of Kent Street allowed the shift of the C2 and C3 buildings. And so the rest of the green ribbon, while it has to make up more grade change, we have more space to do so. And so the next slide emphasizes that with those shifts in the building and Kent Street alignment, we gain more space at the ground level to meet and exceed the vegetation requirement, especially the canopy coverage on the site. So now I'll turn it over to Ked with Minimal.
Great, thank you, Belle. Really excited about these changes. So with these substantive changes that Allie and Belle went through with you, there have been some corresponding procedural revisions to the applications that I want to talk through with you now. So on the next slide, you'll see an overall plan of the site. initially we had proposed final site plans for each element of the site in Land Bays, Land Bay S, Land Bay C, and Land Bay N. And we were going through with a final design process for each of those buildings to be approved, a final site plan with details for each building. Now we are in a position where we are still going to get final site plans approved for the entirety of the site. We are not going to be bringing forward all of the buildings within the PDSP at that final design level. So looking at this slide, you can see there are 3 areas that are not shaded. That's Land Bay S, that's building C1, and building N1. And these are the buildings that we plan to move forward with in the relative near term and to lock in the design for. So we're going to have final site plans with details for Land Bay S, building C1, and building N1. That leaves those shaded areas that are labeled existing. Those encompass both the existing RiverHouse buildings and those future buildings that we do not see moving forward with in the short term, in the immediate term. And as we've said, right, there's a timing element here, right? Part of why we had these shorter buildings initially is we felt like those could be built in the short term. Now that that has changed, we can't necessarily do that with the proposed footprints. We can't necessarily build these in the short term. And so we're not designing them to a final site plan level at this point. So on the next slide here, obviously, if we're moving forward with a portion of the site rather than the entirety of the site, we need to look at this in phases and how these different elements will be delivered and what will come with them. So I mentioned that the Land Bay S, C1, and N1 are the projects that we see going forward in the relative short term, and Land Bay S is likely to go first. And we've shown here what's going to be provided along with these townhomes, right? We will do the green ribbon in that section, Kent Street, the affordable housing that goes along with it. We will be submitting a final site plan with these details. That is not in yet, but that will be something that this committee will review as we continue through this process. And obviously that also means, right, there are going to be some interim conditions, and those are things that we're going to have to discuss and talk through with this committee and with staff. And then one of the important things to keep in mind too is that with these interim conditions, we do have to make sure that the existing RiverHouse buildings remain great places to live and that the amenities that the residents use are still in play. So one of the important elements of this interim condition is going to be maintaining the location of the existing pool and fitness center. Those will ultimately be relocated in the final condition, but not in this short-term interim condition. So if you take a look at the next slide, with all that in mind, this is the build out of what we see as the short-term buildings. That is N1 and C1 in addition to Land Bay S. Again, the relevant portions of the green ribbon will be provided, as well as the accompanying roadway improvements that you see along Joy Street. And there is also the portion of the open space adjacent to N1 up to the parking lot that's existing today. And we will provide those interim conditions as well. Again, just to remind you, those areas that are shaded and labeled as existing will encompass the existing RiverHouse buildings and the future buildings for which there will need to be future final site plans. And so on the next slide, you can see here, this is the massing of what we anticipate that short-term build out to look like. Again, the Land Bay S, C1, and N1, the only buildings for which we are coming forward with specific final site plan designs at this point. And so to summarize on the next slide, kind of going over the things that Allie and Bell spoke about, what we have addressed and revised, both from the 2023 PDSP and LRPC discussion, the 2024 final site plan discussion that brings us to where we are today. So with that, I'll close and we'll be available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Adam Watson with Arlington County Planning Division. And get this to advance. There we go. Okay, so as the applicant just walked through, they made some pretty significant changes to this project in response to comments that they got from the SPRC and from staff and from the community. And so I just wanted to go over a couple of discussion objectives for us this evening for those on the committee here at the table. So the revisions we have are obviously at a conceptual level of detail only. We don't have a formal 4.1 plan submission yet. And so the purpose of this meeting is really to focus on those conceptual changes, sort of high level general changes, so the applicant can hear what everybody has to say before they formally resubmit those 4.1 plans to the county. And I think there's 4 areas in particular, generally speaking, that we would hope to focus in on tonight, where the most changes were made, which would be the density, the building placement, and the building heights, the public space sizes and shapes and locations. That would include the green ribbon also. And then just anybody's initial thoughts or questions about phasing and what sort of each building might bring with it in terms of infrastructure, community benefits. I just want to also note for everybody's awareness that once we have revised 4.1 plans, we will be working with the chair to schedule all the future SPRC meetings and engagements going forward. And those meetings will cover the typical level of detail that we have at SPRC. So focusing in on specific issues like transportation or architecture or building massing, things that we may not have as much information on at this meeting. So again, I'm really just sort of re-highlighting a lot of what the applicant just presented. In terms of residential density, the new proposal is to increase the density by just over 1,200 units over the previous design. And so what that does is increases the density from about 88 units per acre to 123 dwelling units per acre. That the bar graph here is maybe the easiest way to visualize this, where you have gray bars on either end. The far left is the base zoning, the base density for this coordinated redevelopment district, and the right-hand side is the maximum permitted density, which is 150 units per acre. And you can see that shift from light blue, which is the previous design, to the current design, which is in dark blue. So pretty significant increase in density. As far as we're aware, I don't believe there's any significant changes to the retail GFA that we anticipate coming in. So I'm not really focusing on that on this slide. But just want to say that from staff's perspective, this is a positive improvement in terms of achieving the sector plan's goals for increasing our housing production near Metro, increasing multimodal ridership, and then also those community benefits, especially when it comes to affordable housing. So also just highlighting some key changes in building heights. And as the applicant mentioned, they're increasing building heights on the N2 building, the C2, C3 building, and then there's this new N3 building as well. The table here on the right-hand side of the screen, I've highlighted where those shifts have taken place. So N2 building, again, was previously 7 stories, would now be 12 stories, where it's closer to the western lot line, and then stepping up to 22 stories. N3 building, 22 stories, which obviously previously did not exist in the application. C2 is which the elder care building, going from 8 stories to 16, and then C3 building going from 7 to 22. One other key thing here to highlight is that all of these building heights comply with the sector plan building heights limitations, which are shown in the far right column on this table. So again, from the county's perspective, this is a positive thing. The sector plan sets forth goals for having building height variation and for having taller buildings in specific locations where you can also have narrower footprints that allow for larger and more generous public spaces. And the issue we were running into last time was that the width of some of these building footprints were obstructing or diminishing what would otherwise be public open space. And I'm going to just walk through a couple of those spaces quickly now. This is probably hard to read for those in the room, so I can come back to this later if there are questions, but we're just going to do a little comparison here of old versus new. And I'm going to work from the north side of the site down to the south, so going page right to page left, and sort of starting again with that northern area. The first major improvement we think that's happening here is that you now have the N1 and N2 building corners on Joyce Street meeting those fixed build-to lines that are shown in the sector plan, which means you have a width of this future public space that mirrors West Post Plaza across the street, excuse me. In addition to that, this space will now be a full acre public space. That does not include counting into any of the green ribbon or forested area that's up against the western lot line of the site or up towards the north, which was again an issue that we raised previously. Again, building heights on the N2 building would increase here. Again, there's not a final site plan for this building to come forward in the near term, but in the future, you'd have a sort of L-shaped 12-story wing and then stepping up to 22 stories as you move towards Joyce Street. We just note that there may be some additional sector plan deviations that remain with the N1 building. We don't know for sure. We'll see when we get the plans in. But we're going to be trying to looking at this holistically in terms of, are we achieving the overall amount and quality of open space that the sector plan calls for in this location. So I'm moving south through the site now, and this is the central area. Removal of that O building is the applicant highlighted, the O condominium building close to 15th Street Spur. Really allows now for there to be the unobstructed line of sight that the sector plan envisioned, connecting the future expanded Virginia Highlands Park visually and physically up to 15th Street. In addition to that, the building separation between C2 and C3 has been widened significantly. And, that's from staff's perspective, another positive thing in terms of not only having just more public space generally, but allowing for more ample width of the pedestrian path and mode separation for bicyclists, and also having generous landscaping and biophilic elements in there. Building height, as I mentioned on the previous slide, was added to both C2 and C3. And then just to touch on briefly the new N3 building here, the way that this building, at least preliminarily, looks like it's going to be facing the street on Joyce Street, frames the street much better than the previous amenity wing did. And again, we think it's a positive development to have additional housing online in this prime location, which is close to the metro station. Lastly, just highlighting a couple of changes, more minor changes to the southern area. The site layout did change here a little bit. The applicant mentioned the need to change the alignment of Kent Street to be able to preserve that fitness center and the swimming pool that are, if people can see my cursor, just off this image here on the right-hand side of the screen. And so the thick red line is just showing you what that alignment of Kent Street looked like previously compared to what it would look like on the new proposal. There have, of course, been some changes to the townhouse layout, mostly in this sort of center island of townhouses, and also change to the circulation and access to those townhouses. So you have sort of a through from Kent Street out to what would be the new 15th Street. We just would note that there are some previously identified sector plan deviations down here in Land Bay S that we're not sure have been resolved or not yet, mostly pertaining to the streetscape, the number of curb cuts we have down here, and lot line setbacks and forested space. So we'll just be taking a closer look at that again when the 4.1 application comes in. So overall, staff feels that these conceptual changes indicate a significant improvement in terms of achieving both the Pentagon City Sector Plan and our countywide policy goals. I've listed a couple of those here, concentrating high density and commercial development in our metro station areas is really important. It also encourages the use of public transit and then reduces the use of motor vehicles. And going into the sector plan, obviously improving parks, plazas, and green connections, development that helps support community of all ages with an increase in affordable housing, filling the streets and public spaces with people, locating building facades within the build-to zone, building heights that should be varied, and then noting that taller buildings also unlock opportunities to increase the amount and quality of public space available. So that being said, we just want to caveat one more time here at closing that we don't have an application on file yet, so there may be new or existing deviations that we'll cover at future SPRC meetings. We note, as Kedrick mentioned towards the end of the presentation, that I think phasing will become perhaps a more important topic of discussion for the SPRC, as we'll need to look through how infrastructure and public spaces are going to be delivered, not only in the final condition, but also with interim treatment. And then lastly, more detailed and focused discussion of those typical SPRC topics will occur at our future meetings once we have an application for this revised concept, which sort of leads me into my last slide, which is just about our overall public review process and schedule. We're meeting here, highlighted in green, on January 16 to go over these conceptual updates. I don't know at this point in time how many more SPRC meetings we will need to have. We're going to have to talk with the chair. We're going to have to meet internally with staff. And once we get that application in, we'll have more to share with everybody in terms of exactly how many more meetings we're expecting and when those might occur. I would also just say that we are still expecting a separate but concurrent public space planning process to occur for looking into designing the public space between N1 and N2, and also the future public space on the far north end of the site up against Army Navy Drive. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I see, do we have the sign-up list in hand yet? Thank you, Mr. Gibson. We have 4. Okay. Great. And do we have anyone online yet? Okay. So we have many fewer people who have signed up to give public comment than when we last met. So we have a little bit more time amongst ourselves to discuss. And what I'm going to do, because we're advertised until 9. Thank you, Mr. Devanzo, and anyone else online who would like to give public comment, please indicate in the chat, and we'll take note. I want to open it up just free form to, well, I'm gonna go around again, but really just stressing clarifying questions as factual as possible, and then we'll go around again for more detailed questions under the 4 topic areas. And Mr. Watson, when you get a chance, when you're done with that, if you could bring us to slide, I think 2 is what it was. That's where you listed the 4 sort of topic areas that can help us structure our subsequent questions. And I see we're getting a lot of people online, which is great. And we will make sure that we have time for all of you. Part of this little aside by me is trying to figure out how much time we need, so finding out when we need to land. Ms. Garcia, I'm going to go to you first, go around the table, and we will get the 3 of you, and then we will go to people online. So, Ms. Garcia.
Thank you. Good thing I took notes and I have questions ready. So I am curious on the density. Obviously, we talked about the overall addition of units. How many units do we expect, I guess, in the near term in 3 phases? Go ahead.
Sure. So with the townhomes, those are going to be roughly 130 townhomes. I think we're at 127 right now. As Adam mentioned, once we submit those plans, what that number will be finalized, it'll be around 127. C1, again, the near-term phase, that building's roughly 100 units, unchanged from our last application. And then N1, with the deletion of that amenity wing, we lost a couple units there. So that building's around 516 at the moment.
Did you say 516 or 560?
516.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nick Giacobbe, Aurora Highlands. A couple clarifying questions. One is, I wasn't clear about, we talked earlier about the realignment of Little Joyce in order to push more land into the park, and I wasn't sure where that ended up in this design. And then secondly is, where do the amenities end up in the final treatment since the N1 wing has been removed? Thanks.
Sure. So I think you currently were contemplating Little Joyce happening with some of those future buildings, C2, C3, N3, since those are the buildings that directly abut that realignment. And so yet currently we don't feel that we're ready to plan that yet until we can plan those buildings. On the amenity question, it's sort of a similar path. I think we'll have to evaluate where is best in terms of timeline. It'll certainly be something that we look to consider whenever we do move forward with specifically C2 and C3, which would require taking those amenities offline. Thanks, Greg.
Jeff Williams, CPCC. So if you achieve the full build out in the increased number of total units, what is the difference in the number of committed affordable units that results in over the prior?
So there will certainly be an increase, right? We haven't either designed the future buildings yet, nor have we discussed the details of the committed affordable units with the staff. The good news is that the Pentagon City Sector Plan sets out a pretty specific guideline for that, and we will obviously abide by that. But in terms of total numbers, we don't have that information yet because we haven't designed the buildings.
Just to give a rough approximation, it would mathematically, theoretically be 10% of whatever the net new units are. So whatever the change, we don't have the number here tonight, but it would be basically 10%.
Is that the net new units over the base or over the previous submittal then? So if it's 1,400 additional units, then that's 140 approximately new committed affordable units.
Correct. Using those as a hypothetical. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Pam Benheim again. I like the new plans very much. I think my understanding is when we do the first 3 phases, we're not getting the new height or the new density or the smaller footprints, correct? Overall, there's some minor changes, but in general, that will be coming in the future sometime, we hope.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I am somewhat concerned about some of the things that the community really wants, like the senior housing and the urgent care center. And we want to make sure those things are still there. We want to make sure we have all the affordable housing, the green ribbons and the open space and everything.
Ms.
And
Mahai, can I remember that we're in jeopardy rules at this point.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I was also noting that the lower density buildings are coming first in these first initial phases. So does that mean we will see fewer community benefits, like a relative amount of community benefits, or are we already starting discussions to say, well, let's front load some community benefits so the community starts enjoying them earlier, with the assumption that you will be getting the higher density buildings later on?
The answer is I don't know yet because we don't have an application that shows these changes yet. So I don't know. I think preliminarily, I think it would be roughly proportional to the density that comes online. But that remains to be determined. So yeah.
Can I add one thing, Commissioner Peterson? So even in the scenario where everything had been approved at once for a final site plan, there would still likely be some tranching and phasing and when it actually gets built. So whether it's approved later, the build time might be, and the realization of those benefits might be similar.
Okay. And of course, the community always prefers more benefits earlier if you're willing to accommodate that. Thank you.
I think, yeah. Mr. Rep.
Sure. My clarification question is, why are we still building townhomes on the southern end? It seems it's a luxury that Arlington's signaling it can no longer afford. The sector plan is the plans are 4 stories, yet along the first line of the south of the parcel, they can go up to 5 stories. On the southwest side, the sector plan, they're still 4 stories, but the sector plan says you can go up to 8 stories. On the northern end, which curiously, the sector plan increases to 12 stories, even though it's the same line, they are at 12 stories and 22 on the front. So my question is, why underdevelop this portion of the parcel?
I think that that's a question for the applicant, although it looks like you're deciding who's going to answer it. Maybe Mr. Ginnivan? No, thank you.
I think, it's going back to our original plan for the site, we really tried to focus on diversifying the housing types on the site, both as we think about RiverHouse in isolation, but also the broader neighborhood. And that's just an area of the housing market where we've seen some of the most robust demand is for new for sale housing. And given that that is the lowest heights on the site and sort of the transition to the single family neighborhoods to our south, we thought that was a great use in that location.
Commissioner Van Hines?
I think my question was already answered by.
Sorry, Commissioner Hayes. Sorry.
Yeah. From Commissioner Peterson. So it was mostly on timing and when we get to some of those deliverables.
Thank you, Commissioner Haynes. Ms. D, I think you're next. I think so, yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay. I have a lot of questions, but we discussed a lot of things in the last meeting that concern the community, and I don't see any reference to those in the new plan in terms of the green ribbon. Yes, it's been shifted, but we still haven't addressed the fact that the green ribbon from an accessibility standpoint literally stops at the base of 15th Street, which is a huge hill with no actual accessibility up 15th Street, which I think is a non-decision. We talked a lot about tree canopy and wanting to maintain the tree canopy along the back road between the townhomes. And there's been nothing to address that, whether yes, no, maybe so, what is going to be done or not done. We also asked for renderings. Those of us that are up on the ridge, a lot of us asked for renderings to see what our views would be from the backside of our buildings. I would like to see that.
Ms. D, I just want to remind you that we'll have a time where we go around for comments. I'm trying to just encourage people to tease out any specific, like factual or clarifying questions at this round.
I mean, okay, I just don't understand. I mean, these are questions. I mean, they are not part of the presentation, so I'm not sure. To me, that those are factual questions in terms of, what. These are questions that were not answered from the last meeting or have not been addressed. I'll ask you a question. I'll ask the county, why are you so focused on this line of sight thing from 15th Street down? Like, I don't really understand what you're obsessing about line of sight from a street that the only people on it are our condo building, and we're not demanding a line of sight all the way down to Costco.
Yeah, sure. So let's get to. Okay, so this image over here on the left-hand side of the screen is the sector plan, and the dotted arrow here it represents a line of sight unobstructed by buildings, and the whole idea is to be able to have the entire community, not just the people who live next door, but the entire community be able to transverse between the larger expanded Virginia Highlands Park down at the base of the hill and then up to 15th Street Spur and to the neighborhoods beyond. So that's the reason why we've been advocating for that, because it's an county board adopted sector plan.
Can you turn your mic on, please?
The, how can you not have a finalized site plan? I'm not really clear on how you can say that you're going to start with these buildings and then we have this, the rest of these buildings that we're not going to build right now and we haven't really designed them. So we're not sure what they're going to look like, but is this process still going to then approve a specific building height or, but not what the actual design of the building is? Because I still think that we need to talk about the building height because 22 stories is absolutely outrageous. And I'm going to stop my commenting there, but how can you not have a finalized site plan? Like, how can you do this piecemeal?
So I'll answer at least a portion of that, and Mr. Watson might have a response too. And I think what we're envisioning is that there will be an approval of a phase development site plan or PDSP that outlines some of the general parameters of these buildings and these sites. It's something that is done, I wouldn't say frequently, but it's done in a number of cases where the kind of general parameters of a site can be established and folks can understand generally what will go there, with the understanding that there's going to be a future final site plan with those more granular details of what the buildings are going to look like and what the actual heights are, right? This establishes some general guidelines, but doesn't necessarily lock in exact heights, densities, building design, anything of that nature. And if the county staff has anything to add, please do.
Yeah, thanks, Kedrick. I was just going to say maybe an example that folks may be most familiar with is Potomac Yards in Arlington County, which is a phase development site plan like this, where back in 2000, I believe, that phase development site plan was approved. And then sort of like this situation, you have individual site plans that came in for construction over the course of many years. In fact, Potomac Yard is still not entirely built out. The land-based C still has a potential office building that could go in there. But what you saw was over the course of, I think, the first, let's say, 5 to 10 years, I would say about roughly half of it was half or more of it was built out. And then more recently, we've seen a couple of other buildings come up as well. And so that's the phase development site plan is a structure and a method by which you typically have a larger site where you're going to be having different buildings and different pieces of infrastructure coming online over a longer piece of time.
Is there an opportunity before the next phase gets developed to are we going to be able to revisit these conversations? I mean, if you want our support on what's being put up here now, and we say, okay, I mean, not like I'm, the last word, but if the community generally works towards supporting what we're seeing now, is there going to be an opportunity to have a conversation later when they want to revisit these ridiculously tall buildings?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, so just to clarify on that for everybody's sake. So for example, we're not anticipating a final site plan to be filed for the C3 building, which would be one of the 22-story buildings. When that happens, or when there's an amendment to make that happen, obviously that would qualify as a major amendment, and there would be an entirely new SPRC process that we would go through to discuss the details of that building. But at that point, assumably the application would have far more detail in terms of the overall building height, what the architecture is going to look like, what the massing is going to look like, how is the building going to be accessed, where's loading going to occur, where's parking going to occur, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I just have two clarifying questions, and forgive my ignorance. I wasn't at the first SPRC meeting, so forgive me if I'm asking something that's already been addressed. For the green ribbon route, what's like the size of that like pedestrian walkway?
I like the podium. Yes, the green ribbon, we'll be following the sector plan guidance. And so roughly it dimensions out 16 feet, and that varies between planting dimension and the actual pathway between the primary green ribbon and secondary green ribbons.
Okay, great, thanks. And then my second question is, just out of curiosity, could you maybe explain again the logic behind the changes to the Kent Street alignment and the changes to the townhouse circulation? Like what was the the logic between changing from the old proposal to the new proposal.
Sure. So in our last proposal, where we now have building N3, there's actually a wing that jutted out further from the N1 building that was going to be a central amenity building. And that was envisioned to both replace the existing amenity that was on site today, but also serve our future residents. And one of the things we heard is facade lengths were too long on N1. And to accomplish that, in conjunction with some of the density concerns, we replaced that with a high-rise building. And given that's a longer term project, we wanted to make sure that we can maintain amenity access for our residents today. And that road ran through that pool that's there today. And so since that's going to be a later phase, we had to pull that back off the footprint just to ensure that access is maintained. And as a result, given the grades, it made more sense to align the entrance to that alley between that central spine of townhomes slightly more north on site to ensure proper grades. Yeah.
Commissioner Latomi.
Yeah, I'll pass. I have no further questions right now.
I want to stress one point that I know that I've had to remind myself on a couple of times, and it goes to this issue of this is just a procedural, right? This issue of a PDSP, right, is that two other, especially for people who live nearby this site, two other PDSPs that you are familiar with are the Pentagon Center phase development sector plan, a site plan, and the Met Park phase development site plan, right? And both of these you have an overall plan that you approve, and that's the PDSP, but then there is also a site plan approved for each building or project that is part of that PDSP, right? So when I remember when the parking garage at Costco was built, that had to go through its own site plan process subsequent to the adoption of the phase development site plan for the whole site. So it's kind of like a Matryoshka doll is not the right example. It's like a Lego set, with lots of toys, right? You can buy the Lego set, but you have to individually. These are both terrible metaphors. But the point is that so in this, we are expecting that the applicant will file plans to both for both a phase development site plan for the entirety of the site and a site plan for the townhomes. Kedrick, let me know, please forgive me if I have misspoken, but this process would then concurrently assess both the overall PDSP and, as a discrete matter that would be handled concurrently, the site plan for for constructing the townhomes property. And I welcome any corrections from the applicant.
I think that's exactly right, except the scope may also include that C1 and that N1.
Those were some of the corrections I had in mind. Thank you. Yep. But it doesn't always feel like we're doing the 2 or 3 or 4 different things at the same time, but it's worth remembering that we are, if for no other reason, that it's worth remembering that, all of these other buildings have to have their own site plan process too. Thank you for indulging me on that. I struggle with that process myself, and I've been on the commission for almost 8 years. Yeah.
My 2 questions were answered already, so I'll pass on that. I have a comment to make, but I'll make that later.
The 2 questions I have, this might be a bit loud. The 2 questions I have is.
I'm sorry, can you just give us your name and affiliation one more time, please?
Rosamunda Osgo for the RiverHouse condominium. The 2 questions we have is, how was this jump in density arrived at? So what are the reasons for the overnight jump? What new facts or data has led to this? We were under the impression that the builder repeatedly, including at the last SPRC meeting, said that they did not believe the site would support more density. And so all of a sudden now we have 1,200 new units. We want to know what brought that on. And then the second question we have is, what would it take to do a study where the height and density is reconfigured to impact the fewest number of residents on Arlington Ridge. So right now, they're very impacted by N1 and N2. What would it take to look at moving that density to somewhere else on the site plan? Thank you.
Hi, Matt Ginnivan with JVG. Happy to take that question. So I think the first question around the increase in density, I wouldn't say that we have felt that increased density on the site is unsupportable. I think for us, it's always just a balancing act and trying to figure out what's the right balance. And in particular, I think some of the feedback we heard both from SPRC, planning staff, planning commission members, was that our last plan on that scale of, what's the right balance to strike, was putting too much emphasis on sort of the near-term planning needs and our ability to put housing into production sort of in the current market environment, and the long-term need to plan for more housing as market conditions continue to evolve. And so I think that's the balance we're trying to strike with this first phase of buildings that we know we can put in production and add the new housing to the market and the neighborhood in the near term, while still preserving the ability to plan for increased housing in the future. And then to the question on view sheds, I think that's a balance that we are trying to strike. I know that there's sort of any place we put a building, there's some people are going to be happy about that, and some people are going to be unhappy about that. But I think we have tried to strike that, and I think in particular with this revision, even though we have increased the height of a number of the buildings, the view sheds have really opened up significantly in terms of the spaces between the buildings. But I understand, right? Any place where we plan for height, there's going to be some folks who that impacts their views.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Thank you.
Joe Trevette, C2E2. So I have two clarifying questions. So talking about the phased approach. So if this full plan is then approved, can the applicant then go later on when they get to the separate phases, decrease the density then beyond that and say now it's 5 stories?
Yeah, the answer is yes. So for example, for a building where we're not anticipating a final site plan coming in the near term, they could come back later on and say we would like to amend this to have it be fewer. Of course, again, the sector plan recommendations would still stand, and you would also still have the existing PDSP that has sort of established what a baseline of density would be on the site. But yes, it could be less.
And my other questions about the affordable housing aspect, when we talk about roughly 10% of the net new, is that between the individual constituent buildings and developments? So would it be 10% of the townhomes would be also affordable, or is it just 10% of the full site? Of the full site? Okay.
I feel like Phil Donahue with this microphone.
Do we have one person who was with us on?
We have.
Was it Tarsi?
Doris.
Oh,
Doris and Tarsi.
Hi there. I think one of my clarifying questions following up from the previous question is, will the affordability come by phase? So will there be 10% affordability for these buildings, or can that be pushed down the road?
I don't know that we have all the answers on the affordable housing component question specifics tonight. I mean, it overall for the PDSP as a whole, it's 10% of the net new units, meaning you net out existing units that are to remain on the site, and then you take 10% of what's the leftover density to get an approximate number. But I would just say that we don't have a lot of information to share on that. Typically, the very last SPRC is when we'll have a very good understanding of what the exact community benefits will look like in terms of affordable housing. So I apologize that I don't know more now, but I would just say stay tuned, and I just don't want to put any create any misunderstandings about what may or may not happen once we get to the end of SPRC. So just more to come. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally respect that. I think I was just sort of thinking, if there is this phase with a certain number of units that have been committed to being built, but then in the future when the applicant could, in theory, reduce the number of units that are being promised overall, that would, if all of those units were being promised in a future phase, then they wouldn't necessarily reflect. But I appreciate that you have the answers now, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunlop. Mr. Watson, could you, a related question is, can you remind us what the guidance from the sector plan is on, or maybe the applicant can, would do this, about on-site versus contribution?
I might have to phone a friend, Mr. Matuzik, and say I believe the 10% is on site. In the base, this is bonus, and then the base affordable housing requirement. There are options for on site, nearby, and then also cash contribution. But the bonus would be, I believe, on site.
Yeah, there's no cash option for the bonus.
So there would be a mixture of on-site and contribution overall. Okay. Potentially. Okay. Potentially is yeah. Thank you. Ms. Ray, Commissioner Ray, are you still able to? Are you available? You may have to dial *6, and if you're not available, we will come back to you. We have right now 14 people signed up. That is about, just one second. We have about 14 people signed up to speak. That is, so I want to start public comment just after 8:30. So we have about 20 more minutes. I'm going to go around again. Harry, yeah. I'm going to start with you. I know you said you had a question, but you're up next anyway. So.
And it's Cattery, by the way, like that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Cattery.
No worries. We're still friends. I did actually have another question, and this may be more directed at the county. So I know we talked about doing the public space planning, in this phase, but I'm kind of curious, is that premature if those pieces aren't occurring until the later phases?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So we think that those processes should happen now. And so one reason to explain why is when you look at the public space between the N1 and the N2 building, it's true that about half of that we would expect to come with the final site plan for N1, but we still want to have a cohesive park space there. So I'm thinking a little bit of may not be as familiar for everybody as it is for me, but like Land Bay C with Potomac Yard, we had a large public space between two buildings. Each one of those phases was going to bring its own half. We still wanted a coherent whole. So the idea is to have a plan on file, on record of what that looks like. When the N2 building final site plan application comes in, is it possible that might be something we want to revisit? Maybe, but the idea would be to do it now so that it's so that when one half is built, the future half would mirror it and it would work harmoniously. And then with the far northern public space, the idea there again would be that we would have a plan on file to work from, because the actual construction of that park would likely be done through county funding. And so it's a matter of having that plan ready to go for when there's CIP dollars available to do that. Now, again, we don't have an application on file, so I don't totally know the breakdown of community benefits and how everything is going to work, but our thinking on that hasn't changed. The sector plan actually recommends that there be concurrent public space master planning processes for those areas as they're designated on the GLUP, concurrent with SPRC. And so since we're here now with significant amount of the site potentially coming online in the future, including those that touch directly part of those public spaces, we think it's good to proceed with having that now.
So then just as a follow-up, then is it correct then as an understanding that that park space and that designed area would be kind of a given then in going into those next phases and the SPRCs for those next phases?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. J.
Yes, my question is along that same line. Would the build out of the 15th Street spur, would that all be a part of this first phase as well? The full construction?
So you're referring to the green ribbon, correct? So the way it looks now is that a portion of the green ribbon that would be within this sort of townhome application, once you get to Kent Street, would be built in its final condition. Now, what happens between there and when you get down to VHP existing, that's something that we're going to want to talk about further and work with the applicant on to figure out, what's the interim way you get down there? But to answer your question, the portion from 15th Street to Kent Street would come with the townhome final site plan and be constructed. Yes, I believe, yes. Just 1 second.
15th Street, it doesn't actually address the stretch of 15th Street.
Do we want to pull up the plan so we can see what Mr. Jacoby, exactly the space he's asking about? And we can look at the presentation.
If you guys wouldn't mind.
Sure.
I think you guys have a better diagram.
All right, so the question is, what is happening with the green ribbon when it reaches the base of the 15th Street spur and then the connection up the rest of the way to the Lynn Street? Correct. So part of the coordination and ongoing coordination we still have with the county, but right now we are proposing a sidewalk connection along that edge to be finalized when we do submit that FSP.
I just want to say I'm really happy that we're getting these public open spaces, and open spaces, and very generous open spaces between the C buildings. That's going to allow kind of the pedestrian bicycle connection not to be interfering with one another, and it's really a significant improvement from the prior submittal.
Hi. The Kent Street change, is that just an interim condition or is that going to be a permanent change?
So the alignment is a permanent change. So the C2 and C3 future buildings will meet that same alignment in the future.
Okay, thank you. And at some point, which was raised by the Transportation Commissioner, how you've changed the circulation around the townhomes and whether you have new driveways and stuff is not clear. I don't know if you can discuss any of that now.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot more clear once we submit the applications. It's something we're still actively working through.
Okay. One final question. We're doing three different projects, right? Each one will have a separate SPRC.
Concur. Well, the three buildings that Mr. Whitmore identified. So not buildings, the townhomes, and then the other two that we saw as sort of included that actually looked, framed out. They will be part of the same SPRC process as the PDSP itself. It's one of the reasons that we saw so many meetings in the where do we go from here. the buildings that you just saw the outlines for that just looked like, block boxes, those, we will have an SPRC for those perhaps at some point in the future.
Right. But for the 3 that are going forward, you're going to do concurrent SPRCs?
One SPRC process for all,
Okay.
for all 4 of the project.
And if
You'll
the
keep it
process,
straight.
the process that we're in right now will continue, and we will be looking at the final site plans for all the areas that are shown up there that are basically not shaded in gray. Exception being, we'll want to also consider what interim sort of improvements and pedestrian connections and so on and so forth might happen around those existing areas too.
Mr. Whitmore, did you want to?
Yeah, if, I should just add too that it is, Ms. Van had a pretty significant reduction in the SPRC process because initially there was going to be an SPRC for the final design of each of these buildings. And now it's the townhomes plus these other 2.
I'm going to go back to Ms. Garcia because it sounded like you didn't realize that I was asking for overall comments as well.
Comments,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. Thank you for hearing my confusion.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you again. I do also agree with Jeffrey. I really appreciate the addition of open space. I know that's something that we had all been talking about and being important right to the community. And so again, Arlington Ridge Civic Association, you've also heard, I know, from a lot of the condos up on the hill, obviously concerned about view sheds. I think that as we move forward will still be a concern, but obviously alleviated in the near term due to the fact that all the kind of shorter buildings will be built soon. I also know that our residents on the southern edge are very concerned about not wanting or wanting that neighborhood feel and that buildup of low to higher heights. And so the townhouses, I think, hopefully achieve that. I also appreciate really that green ribbon connection and that visibility. I think that'll be a great amenity for the community. I appreciate that the cutbacks on the green ribbon up to the spur, because I think that will make it accessible for community members, and hope that as we move forward, we can look at how all of the connections onto this property from the county will also enable that multimodal transit for people of all abilities. That's it for me.
I think
So one other question I had is the N1 building, there's a white space on Joyce. Is that to deliver the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure as part of that phase of the project?
Yes.
Yes, I think we're still working through exactly where that can take place, but the goal is to deliver part of those improvements along with N1. Our current thinking is what's outlined in that box on screen.
Commissioner Peterson.
Real fast, we're into comments now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very happy with the new plans overall, and I hope it goes forward eventually. And I think they're going to be big improvements. As a pedestrian, I love the expansions and the green ribbons and all that other good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Heim. Commissioner Peterson.
I also appreciate the increase in density in that it will bring more benefits to the community. I like the higher heights in that it's going to provide more open space and green space in the surrounding areas between the buildings. Pleased to see that we will be getting more affordable housing, as well as getting that park space kind of designed and brought to us kind of early in the process. I hope that the applicant will really lean into the green ribbon. I think there's ways that you can do it that are uninspired, and then ways that you can do it where we could be an example for other communities about how we can really maximize green space in a otherwise very urban environment, which this will be. And I'm also hoping that our interim conditions can have a lot of shrubbery and greenery to kind of make the otherwise unpleasant construction feel a little bit softer.
Mr. Reb.
So actually, I first had a question for the planning department. Or are you still accepting questions, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to have us address the elephant in the room, which is this plan, unlike others, directly impacts iconic views of Washington, D.C. from Arlington Ridge. And since I represent, 250 households that are impacted by that, I think it's important for us to talk about it. Arlington County used to care about views. I own condos in a building in Roslyn where the planning department required that it have a hole in it to preserve the views of the Potomac River from Arlington rent-controlled housing across the street. So a developer had to accommodate Arlington's demand that properties maintain their views of, in that case, was Potomac River. This plan itself gives itself points for maintaining a view of Virginia Highlands from the ridge. So views do matter somewhat. And plans for Pentagon City itself, done by the planning department as little as 20 years ago, required that Pentagon City taper down towards Arlington Ridge, not go up. Nothing like what's happening towards Crystal City was contemplated at all. And yet that has all changed. That's why Pentagon Row is 5 stories it is today. And our expectation was that, if you're going to expand on RiverHouse, which is another whole discussion, that it would be something consistent with the area. So that's first. Views from the ridge have historical significance. People have been going up to Arlington Ridge for centuries to look at that view of Washington, D.C. So one, I think I'd like to understand whether Arlington respects views at all. Secondly, if you decide that it doesn't respect it, what about the principle of if I can impact fewer of those views, that's better than impacting more of those views? Or am I just going to take a view that I'm not going to consider it or even think about it at all? And if that's the situation, I would say that's very strange because everybody knows views have impact on economic value. If you look at the tax rolls of the apartments in the condos, the prices go up for the same floor plan, the same ceiling height, everything the same just because it's higher. So Arlington, on one department, is saying views matter. And it appears to be in the planning department, at least for what seems apparent here, it's not even commented on in your assessment of this, that views don't matter. It's a non-entity. So I'd like to understand where Arlington stands on views. Is it fair for us to pay more for apartments that are higher, that have views that we're going to lose? It doesn't seem fair for one department to respect views and other departments not to. So that's my question. I'll have my comments after that.
Mr. Reb, I am going to take that as a comment. That is not the kind of question that, that's a policy question that the parameters of which this process tees up for the commissions and the board to ultimately decide. So there really isn't a question that I think would be in order to provide to that, but it will be taken as a comment, absolutely.
So let me ask as a question, do you think it's not fair when the county considers the impacts of a plan that they actually describe what the impacts are? In other words, there are other layouts.
Mr. Reb, I'm going to take that as a comment that that you would like to see such description or consideration be included in the outcome of the process.
Okay, so if I move to a comment here. I like the fact that there's more open space in this plan. Unfortunately, I'm on the view that I would like to see less density rather than more density. So I think we were in a position with the applicant of getting close to where it needed to be. And certainly within that, we were open to adjusting some of the building footprint to give the open space that you have today and to move the density in certain areas. Unfortunately, this plan overall is a step backwards, and it does not have the support of the condominiums on the Hill for the reason I first discussed, is that impacts iconic Washington, D.C. views of hundreds of units on the ridge, people who paid for those views, and now, even though it's not being built out immediately, you're putting in place that it will be built out. That is a severe hardship on them economically. And they will resist it. And so there is a challenge of whether this ever gets built because there will be resistance. And I view that as unfortunate because I kind of believe that there was an Arlington way where we could all work together and come to reasonable resolutions on things. But I don't see that as having worked in this Pentagon City process. I've filed many papers on this to all levels of government, but I'll keep it short. The Pentagon City sector plan was developed during COVID. It was done, advertised as for Pentagon City only, not as including RiverHouse. RiverHouse was pulled in at the last minute. When it was pulled in, the condos on the hill were not contacted. The planning department knows that we have always taken serious interest in anything relating to the RiverHouse parcel. Therefore, our views were not reflected in that plan. That is why there are a number of features of that plan that do not make full sense. For example, on the western edge, to go from 8 stories to 12 stories. Why? You want to impact more units on the hill as opposed to fewer units on the ridge, because there are very few houses down there. So Matt DeFerranti said he does not want to see anything like what happened in the first passing of the Pentagon City plan. I don't either. I mean, I was part of organizing those 150 people to speak. I would rather we could work this out. Unfortunately, although JBG has been cooperative, I don't feel the county is being cooperative, and that's where I feel the roadblock is. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rebb. Commissioner Haynes.
Thank you. I obviously have a different perspective on that. I appreciate the applicant following the Pentagon City sector plan. Those of us who were involved in that spent a lot of time, and I understand that not everybody was happy with it, but those of us, I think many of us were very happy with the result of it. So anyway, I appreciate the applicant really honing much closer to the sector plan and getting the open space that we had envisioned in that plan, and the green ribbons especially. I do think the opening up of the spaces is really important in having those continuing line of sight into those open spaces. And as Commissioner Peterson said too, I would really urge that some awesome landscaping and biophilic design in there. It's just such a great opportunity. And the last thing would be also the interim, to make sure that we have something, because we don't know how long it's going to be before we get some of these other phases, to make sure that those interim spaces really do connect and have that same feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haynes. Ms. Deep.
I would like to echo everything Mr. Rudd just said. I think it's the fact that the county is completely disregarding property values and how this will affect the people who live on the ridge and the condos is just unconscionable. It really disgusts me. I think that if you look at 22-story buildings, I mean, it changes the landscape. Like, it just completely changes the entire feel of that area in what was a graduated, I can't even speak clearly or eloquently because I'm so angry. So I'm going to go back to beating a dead horse and the green ribbon. Nobody's answering the question. Everybody keeps saying yay to the green ribbon, but you are really only, as I understand it, Bell said, once you hit the base of 15th Street, and keep in mind, we expressed many, many times in the last meeting that we have very serious safety concerns for the stretch of 15th Street, both because that is essentially a driveway into our garages. So we have concerns for the safety of bikers, walkers, riders. We have concerns for the increased traffic around our building, and as well as the grade of the hill. So she just said, if I'm understanding correctly, that the plan right now is you hit the base of the hill and you put in a sidewalk. I don't understand how that is a reasonable option. You are putting all this work into making it accessible until it's not. And if you look at where 15th Street enters onto Lynn Street, I'm bad with distances. It's 30 feet off of the actual intersection. And that curve, as somebody who comes out of my driveway, the cars that speed around that hill, that corner, they come fast. It's bad enough being in a car at the top of that hill waiting, but if you're on a bike that you've probably just walked up a hill because you can't ride it because it's too steep, there's no planning, because that's not part of the JBG property. That's county land. And honestly, sorry guys, we just had a snowstorm. You don't even plow that street for us. We pay our own money to have that street plowed. So how is it that you're putting all this thought into the green ribbon to the point where then you're just going to forget about it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. If you want a green ribbon, and I'm not saying green ribbon is a bad idea, make it make sense.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Mr. Hussein, or Commissioner Hussein.
Thanks. My only comment is I'm looking at the website, and on the land-based C, it says that under C1, the parking, so this is a parking space question. I don't know if this is a relevant comment right now, but so it's related to parking spaces.
I would say that anything about parking ratios would probably want to revisit later once we have an application on file.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you have a flag that you want to plant, that, you're
Yeah.
welcome to, but understand that that's the level of detail that we're at.
Okay, great. Good to know. So all I'll say is just keep in mind the parking ratios. It just says 1.52 per C3, and that just seems kind of high. So I'm just flagging it for I'm guessing at a later date, we'll probably have a deeper discussion about that. So just flagging it for now. Thanks.
Commissioner Lantoni.
Yeah, this is a tremendous step forward from the last iteration, the last couple iterations. I'm seeing this as much more consistent with our comprehensive plan and the Pentagon City Sector Plan. I was very, very disappointed in the last iteration and would not be able to have supported that. This has moved so far in the direction of where it should be for this site, given that it's so close to Metro and other amenities right there, and our continued need for not just affordable housing, but housing, period. The additional density is something that was very much discussed in the Pentagon City Sector Plan lead up, and this gets way closer to what that vision was. We need the units. And I would love to see it be even more so, but this now gets into the range of what is acceptable. So I'm very happy with this, and I certainly am looking forward to the SPRCs with the details for the three to be built imminently, I would hope, phases of this plan. Thank you.
That captures my sentiments as well. Thank you, Commissioner Lantoni.
Okay, now it's on. Gary Shinners with the Park and Rec Commission. We're quite happy with the improvements to the parks, plazas, and public spaces, even though apparently at this stage, nothing is written in stone yet. I want to add, though, that we share the concerns expressed on pages 29 through 32 of the SPRC report with respect to parks and open spaces. And we very much hope that those concerns will continue to be addressed all the way up through the final design of this project. And then I'll just echo a comment earlier about the importance of leaning into the green ribbons and making those as biophilic as possible. And we hope that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shinners. Ms. Osco.
Rosamond Osco for the Ridge House. The Ridge House was okay with the initial density. We're not okay with the overnight jump in density. We are not okay with the heights of the buildings N1 and N2. To echo what other owners on Arlington Ridge have said, they will block our views and devalue our owners' properties. We would like to see the height of N1 and N2 align with Pentagon Row or West Point at 5 stories rather than 7. Again, we were okay with the initial density, and so our ask would be to see a study where height and density is reconfigured to impact the fewest number of residents on Arlington Ridge Road, not the most, which is the case now with N1 and N2. We'd like to see a study of other areas of the site, notably what we've heard tonight, the southwest corner, which I'm hearing allows 8 and 12 stories going up the hill. Height and density there will impact fewer residents on Arlington Ridge Road than putting it where N1 and N2 is, which right now impacts Pentagon Ridge, the Ridge House, and the Representative. That is a lot of residents. That is a lot of tax-paying residents. So that is our ask for that study. If the outcome of the study is to keep N1 and N2 as proposed, we want to see those buildings no higher than Pentagon Row, and the 2 floors of density can be put elsewhere because we were okay with the density in the plan before tonight. To echo Mr. Reb, I think cooperation is better than dissent. We thought the developer was very cooperative, and we feel the hand has been forced to have more density, and we do not agree with it. We do not support the new plan. We do not support the height of N1 and N2. Thank you.
Joe Trevette, C2E2. I would just like to commend the applicant on the new iteration of the plan for the increased density and height, while also preserving the green space. It allows for better efficiency, utility efficiency, for example, resource allocation, and combating against climate change. So thank you.
Thank you. I believe we will go to public comment now. I'm going to have Mr. Watson call it off. I think that we, oh, I'm so sorry. I've forgotten our online colleagues again. Commissioner Day, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did write you some comments that you could share, but my questions relate to a couple of things. One is I had the question about the affordable housing issue, and that we got the answer to that. So I was wondering, with regard to the townhouses, which I understand there will be 106 or something in that area. I'm wondering whether there are plans to develop those townhouses as visitable, something that they did, for example, in the Columbia Pike form-based code. But I don't see any reason it couldn't be done here, so that people with disabilities, if they're visitable, then people with disabilities and their families could live in those townhouses. Certainly there would be some constraints because visitability applies to the path of travel throughout the townhouse development and into at least one door that has no threshold and speaks to universal design features in the first floor. But I think it's very important with so many townhouses being built down there, and I'm assuming that some percentage of those townhouses are going to be affordable, which is even more valuable from that perspective. And then I was wondering about the senior building. Somebody called it senior care. So is it an assisted living apartment complex? It's 100 units, or is it just senior independent living, which is entirely different in scope? And to achieve that, I'm wondering if they're using federal funding for senior housing funding in order to enable that as a totally senior building, because we've seen some projects here that are actually under construction, but they hadn't said, whether it was housing with services or whether it was just senior independent living. And the last aspect relates to the 2 buildings and the townhouses together, about what the percentage is expected to be of Type A fully accessible units versus Fair Housing Act units, and do we know that yet? And anything else about the buildings that are about to be built sooner, about accessibility of units and common areas? So but I know that may come in the second meeting, but I'm just wondering about the percentages of the units.
Thank you, Commissioner Day. Mr. Whitmore, you're nodding your head, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And Commissioner Ray, thank you for those questions and comments. I believe all of those, and I wrote them all down here, both related to visible townhomes, type A units, the senior housing, some of the funding. All of that will be part of our final site plan for the various phases. So
No,
they
wait,
will.
hold up. The townhouses are separate from the senior housing, right? Or what?
Correct.
Yeah,
Well, and I was
that was
just
my-
going through the
yeah.
questions you had there, but sorry, go ahead.
So the question with the townhouses was whether you're going to build them with a visitable design, visitability. And
Right.
then, yeah, so that's one question. And the question is, you know, what are the expectations for the senior building? Because I know that there was some exchange of density and some exchange of accessible building, accessible units from a site plan over around 20th Street. It was a JBG project, and as I understood it, they worked a deal for affordable units and for accessible units to be exchanged with RiverHouse.
I think, Commissioner, today that the takeaway is that these are things that are going to be discussed at future site plan meetings when we have a 4.1 proposal to be reviewing. And that was Mr. Whitmore's comment that would be addressed in the full proposal. And then it will be part of the agenda for a future meeting.
Oh, I thought both of those buildings were being reviewed now for.
Anything else, Commissioner Day?
That was it.
Commissioner Ray, I'm sorry. Commissioner Dunlop, are you still with us?
Yes. Hello. I think generally really happy with the developments here. Just a little bit of a question clarification on the Virginia Highlands Park expansion. If it's going to be delayed as part of this, and by consequence, will the community center be delayed? But doesn't need to be answered tonight. Just wanted to flag that. And then the open space, definitely happy about the additional density and hoping, it plays out over the phased approach in the years to come. And then I think just sort of expressing the general disappointment that the condo situation with the market and whatnot is not maybe feasible at this time, but that is definitely a high demand for the area. And as someone who doesn't necessarily look to buy a townhome or a single family home, but would like to stay in the area in the future, that is sort of an accessible point that I think some people were very much looking forward to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other SPRC panel members present online? I don't believe so. Yeah, I think it's still just the two, but wanted to check. Oh, so we are going to go to public comment now. We have the order, and Mr. Watson's going to call it off. We are likely to go a little bit past 9, but I don't think we're going to go too much past 9 in getting everyone to speak. Mr. Jacoby, okay. You had a quizzical look. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing anything from you. Thank you. So thank you everyone for your indulgence and for your feedback and participation and especially indulgence as we probably go 5 to 10 minutes past. Mr. Watson.
Yes, thank you. Pauline Schwartz, and we have a microphone right over there on the podium. Thank you so much. Or yeah, or feel free to borrow a friend's.
The time limit will be 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Pauline Schwartz. I have been an Arlington resident for more than 25 years. And all of those years I have lived in the Pentagon City neighborhood. For the past 15 years, I have lived in several different condominiums on South Arlington Ridge Road. I believe I will echo the sentiments of Mr. Reb and Ms. D. There has not been enough consideration, especially in this jump in density and this change in the plan. There's not been enough consideration for people who actually currently live in the neighborhoods that will be affected by this development, especially the owners and residents on Arlington Ridge Road. I can tell you right now, just an example of what it's like living in the Pentagon Ridge Condo Association. My unit looks out basically over the RiverHouse parking lot. And especially in the warmer months, we get already a lot of noise, screaming, fireworks going off. And this is from just the density of the residents who are currently there. Now, that noise and these other undesirable elements will only increase with increased density. This jump in density and in total units and in the increase in height up to 22 stories of some of these buildings will completely diminish the quality of life and the property values on Arlington Ridge Road. Now, I've been hearing a lot tonight, and this is the only time in my over 25 years of living in Arlington that I've ever come to a public meeting of this sort and have spoken out and given public comment on anything. And believe me, I have plenty of opinions. The reason I'm here tonight is because I know from my own lived experience how this will impact the people who live on Arlington Ridge Road in the neighborhood. I'm hearing a lot of wonderful
30
things
seconds
about
left.
open spaces and green ribbons, but those things are great, but they don't alleviate these other concerns about an increase in density and also the impact on public safety that increase in density will have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz.
All right, so next we have Robin Day, followed by John Paul.
Thank you. This is Robin Day, and I live at the PRCA. I've been a resident there for over 22 years, and I want to echo some of the items that were brought up by Ms. D and also with Representative Mr. Rapp. We came to the last meeting, and it's been a significant change from what was proposed before, which kind of makes me think I'm coming to public meetings, but are we really being heard? And I know everybody's got different opinions of what should and should not be built up, but it's still the same that you kind of feel like you're blindsided. And I appreciate the fact that you said that all of these buildings later on will still be addressed individually. With that being said, it's not that anybody's really opposed to change, but it's like Mr. Rabb said, we kind of thought we had a more better understanding. I do know that in dealing with some of the developers, they actually were at our residence. They came, they met with us. They listened to our concerns, and I really appreciate the plan that they had previously. This is just so significant from what we had before that, I'm wondering, am I really being heard? So I just wanted to put out that I also agree with Ms. D in terms of living there on 15th Street, that spur with the green ribbon. I don't walk down that hill, and I'm in fairly good shape, but I wouldn't do it. And I actually saw other people not to do that as well. And I've seen some people actually try to get up and down that particular street. So without that being addressed, that's going to be an issue for folks. And I do appreciate you taking the time again to listen to our concerns. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Day.
Thank you. We have John Paul M next. Oh, sir, I need you to step forward and come to the microphone, please.
Good evening, everybody. I just want a clarifying question. Is this the platform to discuss how the level of service for the surrounding roads should be addressed, and also the parking density for all the developments, or is that for the phase development site plan or for the specific site plans that are being passed? Also, could I please get a clarification of what will happen to the public space area between N1 and N2 should N1 proceed?
Just Mr. Watson, I'll go to you.
Yeah, just briefly to answer the question, yes, this is the forum which we will discuss transportation and also discuss phasing of the park space.
But to be clear, this is the forum, not tonight. There will
Excuse me,
be,
not tonight.
there will be a specific meeting during the process where those issues will be covered.
Correct. Sorry. Next we have Suzanne Boisseau. I apologize if I've mispronounced.
That was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was not perfect, being totally sidelined with this revised proposal site plan. I concur with Mr. Reb, Ms. D, Ms. Schwartz, and Ms. Day. I'm property owner at Pentagon Ridge, and I think that the views from the ridge need to be considered. We have a view of Washington Monument. We're taxed on our view. Our property is valued on that view. And if that is obscured with this new development, you're taking out of our pockets and redistributing to the rest of the public. And that's socialist, that's not right. I think that the plan that was presented previously was very much in line with something that was agreeable to the residents on the ridge, the lower density, the lower heights. And I also want to echo the concerns about the accessibility on 15th Street and the really the nonsensical aspect of designing this green ribbon to terminate at the hill of, what is the grade difference there? 20, 30 feet?
30 seconds left, Ms. Boisseau.
30 feet? It's very difficult to walk up. Residents of our building have the access through the building to make that grade change. The general public will not. And it's really a folly to make that a prime design standard.
Thank you, Ms. Boisseau.
Okay, next we are going to turn online Ben DeVonzo.
Hi, all.
Tina Muse. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I definitely have some mixed feelings. It's interesting about these developments. I really appreciate the staff and the developer recognizing that the sector plan was really envisioned as we worked on it to be a long-term document and that we shouldn't sacrifice the long-term potential community improvements, potential housing for community members in favor of the fact that we are right now, the economic environment doesn't allow for greater density. And I think it's really great that this plan now recognizes that and allow for, like the other PDSPs in the area, that there will be changes over time. The kind of mixed bag part of it is that it does look like some of those community benefits, such as the open spaces, will not arrive till the later phases. In particular, the expansion, as far as I could tell, from Virginia Highlands Park and potential community amenities that might come along with it. I hope, maybe that could be reconsidered, at least that potential aspect of it. I don't know how it lines for the construction and the access to the RiverHouse buildings, but I think hopefully, right, we don't want to, Pentagon Center is a PDSP to look to, where we have a park coming in at the very end, decades down the road when Costco goes away. And I really hope we don't end up similarly with the buildings coming first and the community spaces coming later, they should really be commensurate. And I'd say that that should be true for the affordable housing. But I do appreciate the work and direction that the staff and that the applicant have gone through for this, and the better alignment with kind of the discussions originally that had been had around the sector plan.
Thank you, Mr. Devanzo.
Okay, next online we have Tina Muse.
Good evening, RiverHouse resident here. At the October 24th SPRC meeting, JBG presented a site plan that it worked on for over 2 years based on community feedback. JBG kept county staff informed throughout the process, including during the LRPC meetings that preceded the SPRC. Most RiverHouse residents and neighbors were generally comfortable with the site plan, and county staff seemed so too. The proposed building locations and heights fit well within the community. JBG also stated taller buildings would cost it 33% more to build, costs it would have to pass on to renters, and that there is an oversaturation of luxury high-rise apartments in the area. We were excited to hear that there would be townhomes, filling the need for a housing size that's between apartments and single-family homes. RiverHouse is already the 3rd largest apartment community in the greater Washington area, not just in Arlington County, but the greater Washington area. The site plan that was presented October 24th would double this already very high density. County staff has stated it wants taller, narrower buildings because it wants more public space, which it characterizes as a community benefit. This does not make sense when 1, RiverHouse is primarily a residential property, and 2, there are 3 public parks surrounding RiverHouse. The site plan presented tonight will make everyone who actually pays to live here worse off. Existing RiverHouse residents whose views and privacy will be negatively impacted, future RiverHouse residents who will be paying higher rents to subsidize these higher building costs, the neighboring condos whose views will be impacted, and the single-family homes on Arlington Ridge Road and 16th Street South. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Muse.
Okay, next online we have AC, and if you could come on and identify your full name for us, that'd be great. And then after that, we have Fred Z.
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Andrea Serpin, resident at the representative. I just have a question. I thought the first original design with respect to N1 and N2 were tasteful and in line with the existing community. I also thought the green space in between the 2 buildings was going to be quite attractive and provide a nice green space for the residents in the community. The change in N2 is quite troubling, and I was just kind of wondering, I don't know if this is a forum to ask a question here, but my understanding of the site plans, the way site plans work, is that there are concessions made for open green spaces that allow you access to kind of higher density height. Is that correct?
For public comment, we don't we don't typically answer questions.
That's fine.
But what we do is, if you have a concern that you want to see addressed in an upcoming meeting, we make note of that and ensure that it is addressed in an upcoming meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. I just think it's kind of interesting that, you know, the symmetry between the land bay, as you called it, in between N1 and N2 with the existing Pentagon row infrastructure, you know, that was kind of touted as something that you guys were proud of. And then to stick a 22-story building right next to that kind of ruins the symmetry of, I think, what was achieved with the first rendering. I think, you know, putting a 22-story building on that street is going to have dramatic impacts to the area in terms of sunlight, you know, wind. I mean, there's just a whole host of impacts to putting a 22-story building there. And you know, as has been stated, it looks as though this is a I thought the original, I'll just end my comment. Well, I thought the original N1 and N2 construction was going to be in line with the existing community. It was going to be quite an attractive addition, and I think putting 22-story building there is going to ruin the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you, Ms. Serban.
Yes, next we have Fred Z, followed by Abigail Ernest.
Hi, my name's Fred Zimmerman. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I haven't heard much tonight. I have sort of mixed feelings about the new plan. I am pleased that they're still having the step down to the single family neighborhood south of RiverHouse. I think that's really important, and I strongly urge you to keep that because it is a single family neighborhood and it's good to have the step down to it. One thing I have not heard tonight, and probably should be studied if it hasn't been, you're putting Kent Street on the map. You know, it's going to be a major cut through, and I don't know if there's been any traffic study of it. It's now going to be on Google Maps and Waze, and a lot of people are going to use that as basically a through street, and that's really going to impact the people who live on Kent Street now, which is already a problem. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. These traffic things will be addressed as well in their specific meeting.
Correct. Yeah. So next we have Abigail Ernst, followed by Jens Feely.
Yeah, I'm here. It sounds like I missed my opportunity for questions, so I'll go straight to public comment. To echo the last sentiment, I'm concerned that I haven't heard anything regarding the strain that's going to be put on infrastructure in the community. So traffic's a part of that. When you look at a road like Arlington Ridge that connects to 395, it's a small and residential street that now is going to be used as a major through road. Not to mention other public infrastructure like fire stations, hospitals, schools, etc. Taxpayer dollars are going to have to go into funding and expanding all of those services. So now you're taking money from the taxpayers to fund an initiative that we are largely unsatisfied with. So I would really look forward to hearing that addressed in more depth at one of these upcoming meetings. Additionally, to echo, Misty and other residents' standpoints, as a taxpayer and property owner in Arlington, whose property value is based off of her view of the Washington Monument, as well as the general community and historic value of Arlington Ridge. It's really disappointing to hear that the county and the representatives don't seem to be taking into consideration existing Arlington residents when they're backing this proposal. So I'll go ahead and stop there, but would really love to hear more questions addressed as it relates to infrastructure and the impact on taxpayers next time.
Thank you, Ms. Ernst.
All right, Jens Feely, followed by Mark with a C.
Hi, it's actually Karen Feely on Jens Feely's computer. So a couple of points I'd like to make. First of all, I agree with everything Mr. Rep, Ms. D, and the rest of the taxpayers on Arlington Ridge Road has already said, so I won't repeat that too much. I will say I am incredibly disappointed in the county commission, who appears not to listen to what the county taxpayers are requesting, and it kind of makes you wonder why we're having these meetings where it's supposed to be participatory. To that end, also the fact that the address for the link for this meeting went out 30 minutes before it was supposed to start. It was a change, makes it harder for people to participate. That needs to be fixed in the future. But also in terms of the green ribbon, I heard one of the commissioners say that, we're trying to stick more with what was in the original site plan. If they were looking carefully at the approved site plan, there was a note in there that was added at the meeting where the 150 people spoke that said the green ribbon needs to be moved off of 15th Street. That was added at the end. So that needs to be addressed. Also, to that regard, if you're going to have the green ribbon be only a sidewalk and you need it to connect to 15th Street, I would suggest instead of making a ridiculous zigzag that goes right up where all the traffic is at that intersection on 15th Street, that the start of it be at the base of 15th, but then you do a more gradual, longer S-curve going between 15th Street and the stairs up to Joyce Street. That
30
would get rid of the brambles that are there, allow you to be more biophilic, be safer for everybody, and address a lot more concerns. And thank you. And finally, the last concern is that if you're going to reduce the value of all the properties on Arlington Ridge, there should be, the county should be giving a subsequent related discount in the tax rate to those units. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mark, followed by Carol Weiser. And Mark, if you could state your full name for the record, please.
Yes, hi, this is Mark Capistron, and I'm an Arlington RiverHouse condominium resident.
Great,
Can you
thank
hear
you.
me?
Yes.
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I'm going to start my comment with this new plan. It seems to be missing something fundamental when it comes to real estate and property development, and that's highest and best use. You do not build a high rise in the middle of a cornfield, and you do not build a single family house in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. There is analysis that developers like JBG Smith run to determine the highest and best use of the property. And we were close. This was supposed to have been delivered 2025. We are now at a site plan review meeting number 2, and we don't know what we're going to talk about with site plan review meeting number 3. We did not discuss the site plan review meeting, and we yet have site plan review meeting number 5. The process and procedure of this is broken. As somebody who's against this plan, I'm not going to beat a dead horse in terms of, going into the details there, but local government, I've learned in this process more than ever, is supposed to represent us, the people. You are closest to us. We are here to hold you accountable to represent us. And yet, politics is in the way of, if I were for housing, I would say this plan has failed to deliver any housing because everything is being punted to the future. And yet, countless hours are being wasted. So I think we need to get consensus.
Thank you, Mr. Capistran. Thank you, Mr. Capistran.
Yep.
Okay, next we have Carol Weiser, followed by Michael P.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I am completely opposed to the revised proposal to include 3 22-story buildings on this property. Someone commented earlier that that is outrageous, and I think that is a very accurate assessment. It is not in keeping with the character of the area. It is far too dense for the area. I've heard that building above somewhere around 8 stories significantly increases the cost of building, with the result that it is necessary for the developer to charge higher rents. That does not seem to meet the purpose for which we understood we were focusing on, of having a goal of significant additional affordable housing. And this is entirely contrary to that. It would have a canyon effect, creating dark streets, blocking the light. And I also don't think that we have a significant enough understanding of what will be the impact on the infrastructure, as several other people have mentioned. What is the ability of the Pentagon City Metro Station to handle that level of ridership? When I was a commuter, I was often concerned during rush hour at the level of traffic at that metro station. So again, I think this is outrageous. I agree with the comments regarding accessibility and infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiser.
Okay, next we have Michael P., followed by Peter Strack. And Michael, could you again please state your last name for the record?
Yes, it's Perry. And my comments are a couple things. So I was kind of disappointed with the quality of the material that was provided beforehand and online here. But as far as like explaining to the community why this plan you think will lead to your desired outcomes, and frankly, I wasn't even crystal clear what the desired outcomes were, other than just kind of a simplified build more housing units. But so I would like to see a kind of more rigorous statistical economic study if one was conducted. So I mean, maybe that can be addressed after if such thing exists. I'd like to take a look. But anyway, my more specific concern with the plan as I saw it was that it's just packing more density into an already dense area like the RiverHouse, when what I feel that Arlington needs is more of those single family and duplex like houses that are currently residing in just those zoned areas where for single families. I think that's where the hard work needs to be done to make Arlington a livable place. I think building these dense buildings will kind of further divide the homeowners between aspiring homeowners like myself. I've lived in Arlington for about 7 years in apartments and condos, and I'm still fairly young and would like the opportunity to move into a family-friendly home. And my concern is that we're kind of hitting the easy button of just cramming density into dense areas. It's going to just lead to a situation where we have more people in the kind of undesirable homes like apartments and condos, which, sorry, that's what they are. Unless you're like very young or very old, that's not where you want to live. You have more people in those types of houses chasing after the same amount of nice homes. And I'm just worried what
30
what
seconds.
that's going to mean for me as a aspiring homeowner. Will I have to move out of Arlington? Perhaps. And just one other point is what type of thing I'd like to see in a rigorous study is like just looking at nationwide trends. Do people really want to live in high dense buildings near metro stations? I don't really think so. I think we're seeing a trend of people moving away from cities because they want things I mentioned, which are nice homes, and even if that means having to move a bit away from the city and commute and or work remotely. So, bottom line, I'm very concerned that this plan is not
Thank
going
you,
to
Mr.
make
Perry.
Arlington
Your
a
time
livable
has expired.
place. It'll be more a place where people are forced to live in undesirable homes.
Okay, next we have Peter Strack, followed by our last speaker, Susan Castorina.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Hi, my name is Peter Strack. I've lived in Arlington for over 40 years and in a single family home in Arlington Ridge for the past 19. I appreciate the efforts to better activate the RiverHouse space and its continued evolution. And if I may, I'd like to make an appeal to your better design angels to address a couple things. If you could, address underground parking as a community amenity adjacent to Virginia Highlands, especially since parking along Virginia Highlands has pushed parking into neighborhood streets. If you could limit housing heights along the 15th Street transition to the Arlington Ridge or Highlands neighborhood to 3 to 4 stories, that would be great. And I appreciate the push for greater density and would hope to see more pedestrian scaling of the new 22-story high rises. Also appreciate your consideration to improve the South Lynn and Kent Street intersection, which with its very curvy lane, would appreciate widening that to mitigate future car accidents and pedestrian injuries. And while I like the neighborhood feel that was prompted by the previous proposal's renderings, I hope that the future renderings can have a similar design language that encourages similar neighborhood cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strack.
Okay, it looks like we have this our final public speaker, Susan Castorina. think we have you on the phone. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Susan Castorina. I live in Pentagon Ridge. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to say that I was really impressed with the plans in the last meeting where the developer tried to maintain the privacy by leaving trees between 15th Street, between our building and the development. However, I see in this one, it's now much more wide open. That green zone has a direct line all the way from 10th Street, whatever that street is, up to 15th in a straight line along the green zone. To me, this feels like a calculated move to reduce our building's privacy and our safe and secure access to our building. And it feels like this is a deliberate chilling attempt by the county because we've been very vocal in our comments about what we do not like about the site plans. To emphasize what everyone else has been saying and what I brought up at the last meeting, 15th Street is nearly impassable. It is about a 70% grade. If you are trying to make that part of the public access, what you are trying to do is invite lawsuits and injuries from people who fall or get hurt. But since you have continued to make that, we ask that you tell us how you are going to make it, not just the existing residents while maintaining privacy. I also want to know what happens to this access. You're building this green zone, but you're also doing construction at the bottom. What happens to our access to the street that exists now? It appears that it will be taken away at some point during the construction. Can someone please address that? With the comment that there will be a 20% canopy at the green space. That sounds great, but I don't know what 20% is in relation to how many trees are coming down. Are you only replacing 20% of the trees that are coming down? Or are you just saying about 20% of the space are going to have trees? We can't tell you what it means. To me, you're saying 20% coverage or 20% canopy, you're reducing 80% of the existing trees and you're taking away our actual green trees and our life in the neighborhood. I would like to echo people's concerns regarding the infrastructure, particularly fire and water, as I know there are no fire trucks that can reach 22 stories with their ladders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Castorina. And to reiterate that the specific questions about infrastructure access, et cetera, are items that will be on the agenda for future meetings. I want to thank everyone again for your indulgence in staying a little, more than a little late, but I am grateful that we've got so much feedback, and I'm looking forward to reconvening at such time as we are able to reconvene. Have a good night, everyone.